What unfolded in that hearing room was far more than a tense exchange. It was a collision between expectations and reality, between the basic standards demanded of America's defense leadership and the performance of the man currently occupying the role. Representative Vindman didn't walk into the hearing to grandstand, to perform for cameras, or to score partisan points. He walked in with a mission: to confront the widening gap between what a Secretary of Defense must be and what Pete Hegseth has shown himself to be in only a few months on the job. The moment Vindman began speaking, it became clear he wasn't here for political theater. He was here because he believed the stakes were real, not rhetorical, not symbolic, not ideological. Real lives, real missions, real consequences. Vindman's opening line wasn't dramatic, but it was devastating. Are you going to apologize to the mother or not? A single question that instantly reframed the entire hearing. Not about policy, not budgets, not partisan divides. A mother, a pilot, a mission, a breach of trust. And whether the Secretary of Defense, the person responsible for every single American service member, understood that accountability isn't optional. But Hegseth's answer didn't show accountability. It showed avoidance. Instead of acknowledging responsibility, he slipped into a practice line: I don't apologize for success. A sentence that, in the mind of any military family, is a complete misfire, because the question wasn't about success. It was about judgment. It was about discipline. It was about whether sensitive mission information was mishandled, and whether the Secretary of Defense was willing to admit it. Vindman immediately zeroed in, not with anger, but with precision. Failure to protect operational security, OPSEC, isn't a minor oversight. It's the kind of violation that even a new private in the Army knows to avoid. Families know this. Service members know it. Combat commanders know it. But somehow the Secretary of Defense didn't seem to grasp its importance, or worse, didn't think it required an apology. And that's where the deeper problem surfaced. Vindman wasn't testing Hegseth's emotions. He was testing his readiness, his competence, his grasp of facts that no Secretary of Defense should stumble over. When Vindman asked about Indo-Pacific readiness, specifically the Navy's publicly stated benchmark year for being prepared for a potential conflict with China, Hegseth dodged. Not to protect classified information, not because the question was inappropriate, but because he simply didn't know. Vindman supplied the answer: 2027. Next, the size of the Chinese Navy. Hegseth, vague, hesitant, uncertain. Vindman gave a number: 370 ships, the largest navy in the world. Then the U.S. total. Hegseth again wavered. Vindman again supplied the answer: 296. Then the projected Chinese naval expansion by 2030. Hegseth defaulted again into, I believe that's classified, a line that might have been plausible if the figure wasn't already part of a publicly available DoD report. Vindman didn't hesitate. 435 ships. These weren't gotcha questions. These were the basics. The kind of information a Secretary of Defense should be able to rattle off without notes, because these numbers shape strategy, budgets, deployments, and readiness. If you don't know the baseline facts, how can you lead the world's most powerful military? Vindman continued testing, not mocking, not attacking, simply verifying whether the Secretary actually understood the battlefield realities shaping modern warfare. When discussing Ukraine, he asked, what percentage of Ukrainian frontline casualties now come from FPV drones? Hegseth guessed. Vindman delivered the real number: over 70%. A staggering statistic that's reshaping every doctrine in modern combat. The Secretary of Defense couldn't answer it. Then Vindman asked, which U.S. service branch has established standardized doctrine for FPV drone integration? Hegseth guessed the Army. Vindman corrected him. None of them. Meaning the U.S. military still doesn't have official drone doctrine, a glaring vulnerability. And after this long sequence of factual failures, Vindman pivoted back to the most serious issue: accountability for the leak of sensitive information on signal, a leak involving a mission that directly affected the son of a military mother Vindman had personally met. This wasn't abstract policy. This wasn't theoretical risk. This was a parent who believed the Secretary of Defense had compromised her son's safety. Vindman asked her directly weeks earlier what message she wanted delivered. She didn't ask for attention. She didn't ask for a statement. She asked for something simple, an apology, acknowledgement that the Secretary's actions had potentially endangered her child's life. That a mistake had consequences. Vindman presented the question again, clearly, calmly, unmistakably. Do you think you owe her an apology? Hegseth refused. He thanked the son for his heroism. He praised a mission. But he would not take responsibility. He would not admit error. He would not acknowledge the simplest principle of military leadership, that when you mess up, you own it. Vindman didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse Hegseth of malice. Instead, he made the most damning observation possible. Privates are trained to do much better than that. Because they are. Because accountability isn't optional at the lowest levels of military service. And yet, the highest-ranking civilian leader in the Department of Defense was unwilling to say the words that restore trust, which led to Vindman's final line. I think you should resign. Not shouted, not dramatized. Delivered the same way a commanding officer delivers a performance evaluation. Clear, factual, and backed by evidence. Because what the public saw wasn't just fumbling answers. It was a credibility collapse. A demonstration that the Secretary of Defense didn't have command of basic information, didn't understand the gravity of operational security, and didn't believe accountability applied to him. This wasn't politics. This was competence. This was readiness. This was trust. And Vindman showed that the person currently running the Pentagon may lack all three. The moment segment 1 ends. The hearing shifts into something much more intense, structured, and revealing. A deliberate, professional stress test of the Secretary of Defense. Representative Vindman isn't improvising. He's following a sequence built to evaluate whether Pete Hegseth possesses the core competencies required of a defense leader. And the more questions he asks, the more obvious it becomes that this isn't a clash of personalities. It is a diagnostic evaluation of readiness, judgment, and responsibility at the highest level. This entire segment of the hearing exposes a truth the military community understands better than anyone. Knowledge gaps at the top become life-or-death consequences at the bottom. A private who misunderstands battlefield layouts risks a squad. A commander who misreads strategy risks a brigade. But a Secretary of Defense who doesn't know the fundamentals risks the entire national defense posture. And that's precisely why Vindman structures this segment the way he does. He begins with the Indo-Pacific, the arena the U.S. intelligence community considers the defining strategic theater of the next decade. He asks the foundational question, what year has the Navy publicly set as the benchmark for being ready to fight a war with China? This isn't a trick, nor is it obscure. It's the centerpiece of U.S. naval readiness planning. Hegseth's answer, it needs to be now, is the kind of vague response politicians give when they don't have specifics. And Vindman immediately recognizes that evasion for what it is. He supplies the answer himself. 2027. A public, unclassified benchmark everyone in defense leadership should know without hesitation. Then Vindman zooms into quantitative facts shaping global naval balance. These numbers are not minor. They determine how the U.S. allocates budgets, where ships are stationed, which regions receive reinforcements, and how deterrence calculations are made. How many ships does China have? Vindman asks. Hegseth gives what amount to an essay answer. Many and growing. Not a number. Not a range. Not even an approximation. Vindman doesn't let the vagueness slide because vagueness from a Secretary of Defense isn't harmless. It signals a void in strategic awareness. Vindman supplies a number. 370 ships, the largest navy in the world. Then comes the second part. How many ships does the U.S. Navy have? Hegseth stumbles again, eventually landing on south of 300. Vindman confirms a precise figure. 296. These numbers aren't trivia. They're essential to understanding the shrinking U.S. margin of naval superiority. And Vindman isn't done. He turns to projections, asking how many ships China is expected to field by 2030. Hegseth tries to shield the answer behind, I believe that's classified, a move that might seem authoritative to casual observers, but immediately signals to anyone in defense world that he doesn't actually know. Because the number isn't classified. It's right there in unclassified Defense Department assessments. So again, Vindman supplies the answer, 435 ships. At this point, the pattern is undeniable. The Secretary of Defense is guessing, and Vindman is filling in the facts. The hearing isn't contentious. It's clinical. Vindman shifts to Europe next, one of the most geopolitically sensitive regions in the world. He asks about the Suwalki Gap, a 60-mile stretch of territory between Belarus and the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad. It's NATO's most vulnerable corridor, a choke point that military strategists have been analyzing for over a decade. Every mid-level officer who has attended a war college knows about it. Every Secretary of Defense should know about it instinctively. Hegseth does not. Vindman supplies the term, the geography, and even the strategic implications, nuclear-capable missile ranges, threat posture, and the corridor centrality to NATO defense planning. This is not small stuff. This is the backbone of Europe's defense architecture. Then Vindman turns to modern warfare, specifically FPV drones in Ukraine. Anyone who has followed the war understands that drones have radically reshaped frontline combat. The casualty percentages are staggering. The tactical shifts are massive. Every defense leader is studying Ukraine because it's a live laboratory of 21st century warfare. So Vindman asks, what percentage of Ukrainian frontline casualties are now caused by FPV drones? Hegseth offers a vague answer. A very large percentage. Vindman provides a real figure, over 70%. Then comes one of the most revealing questions of the entire hearing. Which U.S. service has written doctrine or standardized procurement for FPV drone integration? Hegseth answers, the Army. Vindman counters with a simple, devastating correction. None of them. Meaning, no standardized drone doctrine, no unified procurement structure, no institutional strategy, no codified operational integration. In other words, while drones are rewriting warfare in real time, the U.S. military is behind, and the Secretary of Defense didn't even know that gap existed. This isn't embarrassing. It's alarming. But this segment goes deeper than a list of incorrect answers. It reveals something far more dangerous. A Secretary of Defense who treats the position like a political studio chair instead of a war room responsibility. A real Secretary of Defense arrives with mastery, numbers, capabilities, threat landscapes, doctrine shifts, lessons from allies, risks, weak spots, readiness metrics. They live and breathe this material because they respect the stakes. Hegseth's performance suggests the opposite, an approach shaped more by TV sound bites than strategic literacy. Vindman doesn't humiliate him. He documents the shortcomings step by step, and he does it because he understands what the public must understand. When the Secretary of Defense doesn't know the basics, it cascades downward in ways that can cost lives. This entire exchange showcases a systemic problem. The top of the Pentagon is not merely misinformed. It is unprepared. And in national security, unpreparedness is a threat. This segment ends with a sense of mounting tension. Not theatrical tension, but the tension of watching someone in a position of enormous authority reveal, one answer at a time, that he may not be capable of carrying its weight. Vindman isn't attacking. He's exposing. He's creating a record. He's sending a signal. And we are watching a Secretary of Defense fail a test he should have passed in his sleep. Segment 3 begins at the exact moment the tone of the hearing shifts. Up to this point, Representative Vindman has been conducting a structured test, a calm, methodical evaluation of Pete Hegseth's knowledge as Secretary of Defense. But now, the subject moves from general competence to something much more sensitive, personal, and emotionally charged, responsibility for the lives of service members. This is where the hearing stops being academic and becomes moral. It becomes about trust. And it becomes about whether the Secretary of Defense understands the difference between defending a talking point and defending actual people. Vindman transitions with almost no change in tone. He simply mentions something that happened weeks earlier, a conversation with the mother of an F-18 pilot. Her son flew part of a mission on March 15th over the Red Sea. This wasn't some routine flight. It was a dangerous operation in an active combat zone involving Houthis, missiles, drones, and real-time threats. Every moment of that mission held risk, and every pilot involved relied on proper operational security to stay alive. This is not political material. It is not theoretical. It is a lived fear and lived experience of military families. Vindman explains that this mother couldn't even be told where the aircraft carrier USS Truman was going. Her son, like all service members, follows strict OPSEC rules. They are trained from day one. You don't talk about operations, not even with your family. You don't reveal locations. You don't reveal timing. You don't give details that could put people in danger. Privates are trained in this. Officers are trained in this. Pilots are trained in this. And yet, according to the mother, the Secretary of Defense himself broke those rules by discussing sensitive mission details in a small signal chat group, a space that was never designed to hold classified or actionable information. Vindman doesn't dramatize it. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't accuse Hegseth of malice. He speaks the way someone speaks when they know the facts and they know the stakes. Calmly, clearly, and firmly. He says that the mother believes Hegseth put her son's life at risk. She believes he jeopardized a mission. She believes he violated basic security protocols. And then he says something even more serious. She wants him to resign. This isn't an activist, not a political donor, not a rival official. A mother, the kind of parent the Pentagon always promises to honor. The kind of person every leader claims to respect. A voice that in military culture is almost sacred, because military families carry the deepest cost of service. Vindman tells Hegseth exactly what she asked him to bring up. She wants an apology, not a firing, not a punishment, not an investigation, just an acknowledgement that what happened was wrong. This becomes a central moment of Segment 3, the moment everything rests on one question. Mr. Secretary, do you think you owe her an apology? The entire room stops. The tone freezes. Even for viewers, this is the point when you lean forward, because the answer reveals a leader's character more than any statistic ever could. Hegseth answers, but not the question. He praises the pilot. He praises the mission. He praises the success of the operation. All true, but all unrelated. He's deflecting. It is a political instinct. When in trouble, talk about something adjacent but safe. Vindman keeps him from sliding away. He repeats the question more directly, more simply. The question is, do you owe her an apology for your actions? This is the kind of question real accountability demands. Not a speech, not a spin, just yes or no. And again, Hegseth avoids answering. He praises the pilot. He praises the team. He emphasizes success. He does everything except the one thing the mother asked for. Vindman then applies the final pressure point, the one that exposes the double standard. Privates get punished for mishandling sensitive information. Junior officers get punished. Pilots get punished. Commanders get punished. Anyone in the chain of command who violates OPSEC gets punished. So why is the Secretary of Defense exempt? Vindman spells it out in plain words. Privates are trained to do much better than that. It was reckless. And then the most important line. It sounds like accountability doesn't extend as far as the Secretary of Defense. This is the entire crisis summarized in one sentence. Rules apply to the bottom, but not the top. Responsibility applies to the rank and file, but not the leader in charge. The culture of the military collapses if that becomes acceptable. And then Vindman concludes with the only logical endpoint of the evidence he has laid out. So I think you should resign. He does not say it with anger. He does not shout. He does not attack. He simply follows the moral path the facts lead to. He says, the mother wants you gone. He says, trust has been broken. He says, accountability is missing. He says, you failed the basic expectation of leadership. This isn't political theater. It is a direct challenge to the idea that powerful officials are insulated from consequences. What makes this segment powerful is that Vindman never makes himself a center. He keeps bringing the focus back to the people who are most affected, the pilots, the service members, the families, the mother who fears her son could have died, the chain of command that depends on trust. And by the end of this segment, something becomes clear. This hearing isn't about left versus right. It's about competence versus incompetence, responsibility versus deflection, leadership versus avoidance. Vindman is showing a truth anyone in the military world understands. Real leadership isn't measured by speeches. It's measured by whether you take responsibility when you make a mistake. And in this moment, Hegseth shows he will not. This is where segment 3 ends, with the sharp realization that a Secretary of Defense who cannot apologize to a military mother is a Secretary of Defense who may not be fit to lead the people she raised. The room changed the moment Pam Bondi stopped talking. For nearly an hour she had pushed back, redirected, smiled at the cameras, and repeated the same rehearsed talking points. But when Congressman Frank Mavin dropped his final question, everything froze. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It didn't even sound like a trap. And yet, everyone in the hearing room felt the shift, like someone had quietly pulled the floor out from under her. Mavin leaned forward, elbows on the desk, voice steady. Ms. Bondi, who exactly instructed FBI field agents to delete communication logs before forwarding their reports? No emotion, no anger, just a question so specific that it cut through the noise like a razor. Bondi blinked. Once, twice. Her smile dropped for half a second, barely noticeable unless you were watching closely. But the cameras caught it. Millions of people would later slow the clip down, frame by frame, pointing out the moment her confidence cracked. She reached for her papers, flipping through them even though everyone knew she didn't need them. "Congressman, I believe you may be misunderstanding the context of that email," she said, voice tightening. But Mavin didn't move. "I'm not asking about the context," he replied. "I'm asking who gave the order." The silence that followed was heavy. Bondi glanced toward her staff seated behind her. None of them moved. None of them could help her now. And then it happened. The slip, the instruction, well, it wasn't meant to be taken literally, she said. It was part of an internal strategy memo. A strategy memo? In that single phrase, she revealed far more than she intended. Reporters in the room started typing instantly. Phones buzzed. Staffers exchanged quick, stunned glances. Bondi realized her mistake immediately. She tried to walk it back, adding, "It's still under review, of course." But the damage was done. Because until that moment, her entire defense was built on the claim that the directive was a simple miscommunication by lower-level staff. But now she had accidentally admitted it was part of a formal internal strategy. Mavin didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Bondi. That answers the question." Bondi swallowed hard. Everyone in the room knew what they had just witnessed. Not an emotional outburst, not a fiery exchange, but something far more dangerous in Washington. A calm question that led to an unforced confession. Outside the chamber, the clip began spreading like wildfire. Commentators called it the moment the narrative cracked. Others said it was Bondi's biggest public mistake yet. But inside the room, one thing was clear. For the first time since the hearing began, the story was no longer under Pam Bondi's control. The hearing was supposed to be routine. A few questions, a few rehearsed answers, a few sound bites of the evening news. But after Pam Bondi's unexpected slip in segment 4, the atmosphere shifted from political theater to something far more serious. People who had been casually scrolling their phones were now sitting upright. Even the committee members who usually drifted in and out of attention were suddenly focused, because everyone sensed the same thing. Bondi had revealed something she shouldn't have. Congressman Mavin cleared his throat gently, almost politely, as he prepared his follow-up. Bondi tried to preempt him, diving into a long explanation about standard interagency practices, misinterpreted directives, and procedural wording that could be easily taken out of context. It was classic damage control. Talk fast, sound confident, and hope the moment passes. But the moment didn't pass. Mavin waited patiently, hands folded, until she ran out of words. When her voice finally trailed off, he leaned forward. "Ms. Bondi," he said softly, "just to make sure we all understand, you're now confirming that the deletion instruction was part of an official internal strategy memo, correct?" Bondi froze. Her eyes darted left, then right, as if searching for an escape route. You could almost see the calculation happening behind her eyes. Should she deny? Should she deflect? Should she double down? Every option had consequences, and every consequence was worse than the last. "I'm saying," she replied slowly, that the memo contained language that was not finalized nor approved for operational use. A ripple moved through the audience. Mavin wasn't satisfied. "So the memo exists?" he asked. There it was. Bondi hesitated, just long enough for the cameras to catch it. "Yes," she admitted. A draft memo instructing FBI field agents to delete logs before forwarding reports. For the first time since the hearing began, a low murmur filled the chamber. Reporters stopped writing and simply stared. Committee staff whispered urgently to each other. Even the chairman, who had been stone-faced and neutral all day, slowly lifted his head. Mavin pressed one final time. "And who authored this memo?" Bondi stiffened. I don't recall at the moment." Nobody believed her. Not the committee, not the reporters, not the millions watching online, who would replay this exchange again and again, because the truth was obvious. Her memory didn't fail her. Her strategy did. Mavin sat back, satisfied. He didn't need to push further. He had everything he wanted. A clear admission, a documented directive, a witness who had walked herself into the center of the storm. And the hearing wasn't over yet. For the first time all day, it became clear that Bondi wasn't defending a position anymore. She was defending herself.